So what exactly is Shane Steichen's culpability in all of this? And more importantly, culpability in what? Like, what exactly is it right now as Colts fans that we're looking at? There's no question that it's a tough spot. Nobody would make the case that what the Colts are dealing with are ideal circumstances. But exactly what it is kind of where the real discussion is. You know, as Colts fans, we have a little bit of PTSD, and PTSD is oftentimes like a justified response to whatever it is that you've experienced. But make no mistake, it has you act irrationally, right? Like those negative emotions are related to whatever experiences that we've had as Colts fans. And I'm not saying that this type of thing is real. I'm not saying it's not. All I'm saying is that if you're the type of person that believes in something like, let's say, a curse, there's a pretty good case to be made that the Colts quarterback position is cursed. In fact, hell, I'd go as far as to say there's a better case to be made for that than Chris Ballard being fired as the GM. I think if there's one thing that is starting to become blatantly obvious to those who believe in that type of thing, is that perhaps there's a little bit of bad juju here in Indianapolis when it comes to that quarterback position. So, not that that lets Steichen off the hook. All I'm saying is, what are we looking at? And why defend Shane Steichen? Like, why be the guy to do it? Why be confident in Shane Steichen? Hell, why not be confident in Shane Steichen? Why question him? We're going to talk about it all today. But before we do, you know what it is. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone enjoying and watching and all that type of stuff. Go ahead, shoot it a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're trying to get to 3,000 over here on the YouTube channel. Audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying the show as we continue this discussion about Colts head coach Shane Steichen. For starters, let's just revisit the decision itself, okay? Because that conversation is ongoing, and what I'm not going to allow us to do is partake in some sort of revisionist history because it justifies the anger that we're feeling right now as fans. Going in to this game, number one, in fact, going into the decision, there's a case to be made both ways. Like, you have a set of reasons why you should keep playing Anthony Richardson, and you have a set of reasons why you would bench Anthony Richardson. And it just comes down to which one you kind of weigh and how you weigh them, right? Which one's more important and which one do you value more? It's almost like one of those things that which one just clicks with you as a person more? Because again, justifications on both sides. Like, for example, why do it? Well, you have Anthony Richardson, who has, listen, if it's not the worst completion percentage in the history of starting NFL, I mean, the NFL has been around a very long time. And I'm always one of the people that says that the tape, I mean, you could go back, fact check me. I'm not going to pretend I didn't say something. I always thought the film was better than the stats. But you could only take it so far. When you have the worst, if not one of the bottom three worst completion percentages in the history of playing quarterback, I mean, that's one thing. And in fact, the Colts, I think, were willing to tolerate that one thing. But when you couple that with what is seeming to be a lack of maturity, or at least a display of immaturity, right? Because it's not like you're either just mature or you're immature. Like, you may be mature in some aspects of your life and immature in other aspects. And what we started, I think, what we learned about Anthony Richardson is that at minimum, he didn't understand the gravity of what it meant to kind of be the face of the franchise. Because the tap out, heat of the moment or not, for your mind to even go there, right? For you to even think that that's an option, I mean, something in the reasoning is off a little bit, right? We could agree on that. So when you couple those two things together, you really can't tolerate that type of play while trying to sell the rest of the roster that you're trying to win games. Now, you look at the team as a whole and some of the interviews that came out after the fact. These are guys that sounded disappointed for sure, maybe even surprised that the decision was made. But I do see some chatter that it's clear and obvious that the players did not support this decision to go to Joe Flacco. I'm not quite sure that's what it is that I saw. I think you have a guy in Josh Downs who was drafted with Anthony Richardson and is close friends with Anthony Richardson. And I think you have a set of receivers and a set really of players that, we know how the Colts roll. These are very much the same set of guys who have been seeing this cycle of quarterbacks going on this entire time. You have guys that are disappointed. But all I'm saying is that it's not entirely sure, or we're not entirely sure, that they didn't support the move. And if I'm to take a guess, I don't think they were all entirely against it. That's just me. To bring it back to Steichen, though, all I'm saying is you're trying to sell these guys on a reason to come out to the game every Sunday and give it their absolute all. And to do that, to convince them of that, you have to convince them you're trying to give them the best chance to win. So, in my opinion, that's what happened. And then on top of it, when we talk about Anthony Richardson's development, not for anything, imagine he played that bad and did what he did and tapped out of a game. I mean, at some point, right? And where that point is up for interpretation. At some point, you have to hold them accountable, right? We have these conversations about accountability all the time. But at some point, you have to do it. I mean, that lesson to Anthony Richardson can be argued as nearly just as important as the reps. Sure, you ideally wouldn't want to have to teach that lesson. But ultimately, you can argue that without learning that lesson, he can never ascend to the heights that he would need to ascend to, regardless of the fact. And the line between accountability and just irrational reactionary behavior is a very, very, very delicate thing, right? In the realm of Shane Steichen, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the start of the show and is the title of the video. Shane Steichen, up until this point, like, why be confident in Shane? Every single offense he has touched, from the Chargers to the Eagles to the Indianapolis Colts last season, has gotten better. Only this year have we seen something different than that. Now, we can talk about play calling all we want. At the end of the day, the Colts have been in some games. They've been in most games, and I'm not saying they've played great. But what I am saying is this. Anthony Richardson, objectively, was not playing like a starting quarterback in the NFL. I mean, if we were every single week coming out of the game and looking and saying, this kid, for all the spectacular plays that he was making and all the upside that you see oozing out of Anthony Richardson, because with the bad with him does come some spectacular, spectacular highs, right? Not many spectacular highs, but the ones that are there are really spectacular. He ultimately was missing throws left and right. We observed it. We spoke about it. That was the truth. We can't pretend that wasn't what was going on. That's not play calling. How many times did we look and say, he just missed a wide open throw? He missed a wide open throw. That's not on the scheme. If you're missing the throw, you're missing the throw. So for me, as a play caller, as an offensive mind, I'm not willing to jump off on Shane Steichen just yet. I mean, I know it's a what have you done for me lately league, right? But at the same time, I mean, I'm not willing to ignore just all of this evidence right here for this one sample that we're going through right now, which ultimately is only 4-5. I mean, it's not like we're the worst team in football, okay? That's just objectively not the truth. But here's the caveat to that, right? Because for those of you guys who are not on the board with Shane Steichen, I will raise a question that leans in your side that I'm observing. Okay, so I'm being objective and as fair as I possibly can be. The caveat to everything I'm saying right there is all of the experience that has bolstered Shane Steichen's resume was as an offensive coordinator. This is his first time being the head coach, and we talk about him being the quarterback whisperer. That was the big thing when he came in, right? All the work he did with Justin Herbert, more specifically, the guy that we really looked at and got us really excited about was the work he did with Jalen Hurts. That stuff really happened. But this is the first time that Shane Steichen was the one at the helm entirely being the head coach that drafted the quarterback and had the final say into who it was and ultimately how the situation was going to be handled. So if Anthony Richardson is not the guy, and I'll tell you, if we're playing a game of chances, what do you got? A 10% chance that Anthony Richardson is the franchise quarterback of the Colts? I think I'm even being generous with him. And I'm not saying, and I'm only really just talking about historical evidence, right? Because I could sit here and make the case that Anthony Richardson's the unicorn all I want. I would love to. But ultimately, we have to live in the reality that is. If that is true and Anthony Richardson is not the quarterback, Shane Steichen's hands are not clean. But as it currently stands, all I'm saying is we can't rush the story. So if we're going to sit here and be objective in the way that we analyze this stuff, you got to let it breathe. I mean, that's what we're looking at right now. We lost to a Vikings team that is very good. The defense, very good, particularly against the run, I think. Actually, just take that back. In fact, take that back. What I know about the Vikings defense is that they're complex and that they do a lot of things before the snap to disguise their coverage. And I think they're good against the run on the season. But I'm just saying it. I want to not miss my entire. I don't want someone to hear that, it be wrong, and then it negate everything I just said, right? That Vikings team was good, once undefeated this season, and now 6-2. I just think it's a little bit soon to go to the extremes that we're going with Shane Steichen. But he does have a situation on his hands right now that does risk becoming a massive, massive issue. PTSD says, here comes the pain. But ultimately, Shane Steichen right now is in the middle of writing that story. That story is not written. That's all I got, actually. I was going to just let that sit there. And I realized I normally do an outro. Go Colts.